Hi friends, this is Crystal from Homemaking on the Homestead, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make coleslaw for your freezer. This is a vinegar-based coleslaw, so it doesn't have any dairy products in it. You can serve it just as is, or after you defrost it you can drain it and throw a little mayonnaise into it if you want it creamy. The link to the recipe is listed below. I have made the whole recipe, and I've also had some in the freezer for about 2 weeks that I pulled out last night, and we had it, so at the end of the video I show you what it looks like after it's been in the freezer and defrosted. It does get a little bit soft, but not as soft and limp as you might think. It still had crunch to it. We just ate it as is with our dinner last night and enjoyed it just as much as we did when I had first made it. The coloring of it does change a little, of course, because of the freezer, but otherwise I think it's a great use for cabbage, which I had 2 cabbages that I needed to get used up. My husband and I were heading out we'd be gone for a little while, so I wanted to use the cabbages some way before I left. So I thought, I remembered that I had made this freezer slaw recipe I made several years ago, and that it seemed like my memory is that it was good and that we enjoyed it. So I thought, well, let me give that a try. I'm very happy that I made it, and I hope that you enjoy it too. So let's start making some coleslaw. I started out by using 2 medium-sized heads of cabbage, maybe smaller to medium-sized. I used a purple one, as you can see, and a green. You could also add carrots and onions. You need to cut the cabbage in quarters, core it, and then slice it all up. When I had finished slicing up all my cabbage, I put it into my bowl, and then I put on about a teaspoon of salt. I was doing a little bit bigger recipe than what it had called for, so I did a generous teaspoon of salt. And then I just got in there with my hands and kind of stirred it all up. The purpose of this is to pull out excess moisture in the cabbage. I then repeated the same process with my green cabbage. I cut it in quarters, I cored it, I sliced it as thin as possible. You could also use a food processor if you'd like. And after that, I did the same thing. I added a teaspoon of salt. I could have used a bigger bowl, but my bigger bowl was being used by something else at the time, so I just kind of made do with what I had. And I kind of mixed that around to kind of distribute the salt. And then I poured boiling water over the top of it. And again, this is to help the salt dissolve and to help the cabbage draw out any excess moisture. I stirred that around the best that I could, and then I just let that sit for about an hour. While that sat, and I put it in the refrigerator for that hour. While that sat, I made the brine, which consisted of water, sugar, and some apple cider vinegar. And I put that on the stove and warmed it up until all the sugar had dissolved. At this point, I pulled out my cabbage and stirred it around a bit more, just to kind of mix up the green and the purple. After I got that all mixed up, it was time for me to drain the cabbage. So I got my strainer out, set it in a bowl. You could also do it directly into the sink, but it was easier to do it this way for the video. And then I dumped the cabbage and that had the water and the salt on it. I just dumped that all into my strainer. At this point, I wanted to make sure that it drained well and that my brine that I had made cooled down enough. So I put some plastic over it and I put that in the refrigerator to set for a little while. I can't remember how long I let it do that, but until the brine was cold. After it was all done and I pulled it out of the refrigerator, I dumped it back into my bowl and I poured the brine over the top of it. And I stirred that. Again, like I said, I could have used a bigger bowl, but I just did the best with what I had, and I stirred it all up just to make sure all the cabbage was evenly coated, nicely coated with all of that. And then it was time to prepare it to put it in the freezer. I used quart-sized Ziploc bags that made good size servings for just my husband and I. It's a little bit of a mess and kind of awkward to try to get it into the bag, but I just kind of kept shoveling until the bag looked like it was full enough. And then I closed the bag and made sure I could get all the excess air out of it. Then I pulled out some for us to eat that night and the next night. We had that for 2 nights and set that aside. Then I continued to repeat the process, filling up my bags until I was out of coleslaw. Because the brine has sugar in it, I realized that the outside of the bags, by the time I was done, were pretty sticky, so I wiped them all off. So in the end, I ended up with 4 quart-sized bags and enough for us to eat for a couple nights. 2 weeks later, I pulled one out of the freezer to go with our dinner. And you can see it's mostly defrosted here. It was still a little bit crispy or crunchy with the ice, but I just opened it up and poured it into a bowl and took a fork and kind of broke up any little bits of ice I might see and stirred it around, and I let that just sit on the counter until we had dinner. I thought it turned out great. It was still crispy enough for our taste, and it worked very well. I look forward to using the rest of it. Thanks for watching my video. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like my content, would you please consider subscribing? I really appreciate that. And I appreciate each and every one of you that does take the time to watch my videos. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.